Okay, I'm going to do a few up here. You can follow along if you need to. So I'm going to plug in -3 in for x. So that just means I substitute x equals 3, but everything else stays the same. So once you plug in the number, you should not have an x anymore. You should have only one variable. Right? So we have -6 minus what equals 1. Add 6 to both sides. Okay. We'll have -y, or the opposite of y, equals 7. So if we divide both sides by -1, y equals -7. Now, one of the things that you probably caught on to if you did all the homework yesterday is that if you started off with an equation that was x equals or y equals a number, well, that was pretty much half your answer. If you go back to here and you can see if you started off with x equals 2 on your last night's homework, y equals 2 on your last night's homework here, then y was 2 in your answer, right? If you start off with x equals -1 in the here, well, that was part of your answer. So if you have one of the two equations is already x equals and y equals, you don't really have as much to do. So we know our solution is -3, -7. Now, how do you check? Check is just like before. You take the equations and you plug in your answer and see if it works. The only difference is now that you have two variables. So you have to plug in both, right? You have x and y. So you have to plug in -3 for x, -7 for y. And if you did it correctly, it should equal +1. So you just go through the arithmetic and you make sure that you get the same thing on both sides, and that's your check. Now you should do a check with both equations, but this first equation is just x equals -3. So if you did a check here and you plugged in -3, it's pretty much, immediate. You've got a check. So not a whole lot there. Okay. So in all these, you're just plugging in the number. You're substituting in, I should say. That's why they call it substitution method. Y equals -3, so I plug in -3 right here, and then just solve the equation that I am left with. Okay? And solve, do a check, make sure it works. The answer should be on the graph on the back side as well. Now, you'll notice that I'm using parentheses when I plug things in. That is a good idea because if you're plugging in something with a plus or a minus, you'll notice that, well, you'll find out that you have to do some distributive property. And without the parentheses, your answers will come out incorrect. So these ones, 1, 2, 3, and 4, no big deal. But once you get down to number 5, right, we have this whole thing equal to y. So that means right here, on the second equation, you have to use parentheses. Without the parentheses, this will not work. So make sure you use parentheses here and put in the 3x minus 10. Right? And then you can solve it. -2 times 3 and get -6x. And -2 times -10 and get +20. Right? See, without the parentheses, you wouldn't be getting +20. It would be like -10 or -20 or something. You got to watch those signs because it's all basic equation solving, but one mistake will throw everything off. Okay, and then we can start solving. We say, okay, we got like terms here. We got -2x and -6x. That's -8x. All right. Subtract 20 on both sides. And divide. Take that answer of -2, not -2, +2, -5 and negative positive. Take that answer and plug it back into either equation. Some people have asked, does it matter which one? And the answer is no, because this is the only place where the answers are the same for both. So we can plug into either one. We have y equals 4. And then you could do a check for both, make sure they both work. Okay? So keep on working. Make sure you use parentheses when you're plugging in something with a plus or a minus. Okay, so a little review of what we've been doing. Take a look up here for a moment. Here's where we started yesterday, right? We took two lines and graphed them, right? And we said, well, sometimes they're not always going to be these perfect numbers, but then there's this other method where we can just substitute in or plug in to get the answers as well. And we can get a more precise, exact answer this way. Okay? So we did a few of them, but the thing is that on all of your problems so far, they were always y equals or x equals, so the plugging in was immediate. You could just say, oh, y equals 2x, oh, 2x for y, and go straight into solving. So when you get down to number 8 on the homework, right, you'll notice that it's not y equals or x equals. So something like this, where you don't have one of them y equals or x equals, you just might have to do a little bit of work and solve one of them for either y or x, whichever is easier. And the way to do that is pretty much look for, well, which of them already have a coefficient of 1. So if you look at all 4 of these variables here, this has a 2, a 2, and a 3, but this doesn't have anything, which means it's easier to solve for. All I have to do is subtract 2y on both sides, and now it's basically ready to go, and it's like a problem from last night's homework. So you might have to do a little step. The only thing that's a little weird is that you have to be okay with solving for x. We got so used to solving for y because when you graph, it's always y equals. Substitution method, it does not have to be y equals. Okay, but then it's business as usual. But make sure you use parentheses when you're plugging in. Right? So if you don't use the parentheses, it'll mess things up. You have to distribute and then solve, you know, using all our normal algebra steps to get the right answer. Plug it back in. And then voila, you'll have your answer. Okay? So you're always looking for the equation that's easier to solve for. So here you can see that, well, it's probably easier to solve for y here, and then plug that in and solve. So that's the only thing that's new today. Okay? And of course we can get fraction answers, that's perfectly fine. And we'll begin more of that later on, by the way. We'll have fraction answers. So I'll get practice with that. So going back to our homework here, let's go down to number 8. Yeah, let's go down to number 8. And that's where it starts, where you do not have one of them solved for y or x. Right? So starting here, you have to look at all these and decide, well, which one is easier to solve for y or x? And again, you're looking for which one hopefully already has a coefficient of 1, and that would be this one right here. So we take that equation, we can just add 6x to both sides, and then it's y equals 6x plus 1, and we can plug this in. Since this y equals 6x plus 1, so does this y. Just make sure you use parentheses when you plug it in, and it should be just like last night's homework. So we got 6x minus 2 times, in parentheses, the 6x plus 1 with y equals, right? And that should equal negative 2. So must use parentheses because we have to do distributive property. I've asked this many times, but just to make sure we still got it, what number is in front of the parentheses here? Yeah, negative 2. So make sure you do negative 2 times 6x and negative 2 times positive 1. So we got 6x minus 12x, which is negative 6x. And we're going to add 2 to both sides here. We got a minus 2. We're going to add 2 to both sides. So negative 6x times what number is equal to 2 minus 2 is 0. So negative 6 times what is 0? And you get 0. Yeah, divide both sides by negative 6, and x equals 0. So we know part of our solution, since we got x equals 0, it's going to be 0 comma something, right? And then you can take your 0 from here, plug it in right here. So we got y equals 6 times 0 plus 1, which is just 1. And we could do a check. Now there's the check of the graph on the back, but there's also just the mental check. What's, on your test, you're not going to have the answer key on the back somewhere, and you can just match it up. So how do you check if you don't have the graph like today or the check like yesterday? Just plug it in. X is 0, y is 1. So we got negative 6 times 0 is 0, plus 1 equals 1. So that checks out. You plug x and y back in, it should equal that number. 6 times 0 minus 2 times 1, that'd be negative 2. So negative 2 equals negative 2. So it checks out. So you can check these pretty quickly mentally to see if it's 100% or not. You don't have to turn it in and hope, well, I hope those are right. Okay, so just do the check as long as addition to looking at the graph on the back. Okay, so just 2 more on the back where you have to decide which ones to solve for. So on number 9, which one is easier to solve for, the top or bottom equation? And this is negative y. This is positive. So probably want to solve for y here on the bottom one. A little bit easier. The top will work, but the bottom's faster. Same thing here. Looking for the coefficient of 1. Probably the top one's faster. Okay. Go ahead and finish that up, and we'll be done for the day.